Well, first of all, you're a juror. You have to ask yes, no, or there's a reasonable doubt, maybe. Abuse of office for personal gain. I would say reasonable doubt. I'd like to hear the president's side of it. Personal interest over national interest. I don't think so. I really don't think so. But I guess reasonable doubt, if we're going to be fair. Withholding meetings from President Zelensky until you announce. Well, see, I have to say yes or reasonable doubt if I know his intent. But I have to hear the other side to find out what his intent was. It's easy to say he's a bad man and I don't like anything he does and he doesn't care about the country, he just cares about himself. Maybe. But is it in our interest to find the missing money? Is it in our interest to see if our vice president was using our country as a slot machine? Is it important to find out what the State Department was doing in Ukraine? All of that is in our national interest. Now, did he do it for personal gain? Maybe. Was that the first priority, or was national interest the first priority? Just according to the text, it's in our national interest first, and not his interest, because he only brought that up after everything else. Now, the president's defenders have dismissed this idea of quid pro quo, arguing that Trump released the military aid, blah, 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 blah. Well, the Judiciary Committee report, the Democrats counter, saying the president cannot escape impeachment just because his scheme to abuse power, betray the nation, or corrupt elections was discovered and abandoned. Well, I would agree with that, except we haven't seen the evidence that Trump felt like he got caught doing something wrong and then suddenly handed over the military aid. There's plenty of conjecture. There's smoke. There's enough to say, well, reasonable doubt. I'd like to hear more. It's still disputed whether Trump actually held the military aid hostage in exchange for the investigations. But even if he did, is it unreasonable to say, in the national interest, I'm not doing business with you until you show me that you're not corrupt, that you're going to start looking into where our missing money is? Also, President Zelensky is on record saying he didn't feel any pressure to announce the investigations to get the military aid. The president's on record saying, I don't want any quid pro quo on that. Democrats don't have the Nixon Watergate burglar evidence that they're looking for with the military aid angle. And as for Feldman's third point about the White House visit in exchange for investigations, I don't know why you're doing that. I mean, first of all, if we're going to sift through all the presidents, every future president, sift through all of their phone calls, listening in as they work various angles on foreign leaders, then impeachment hearings will be ongoing Monday through Friday all year long. For the rest of our lives, we'll need to have a department of impeachment to keep up with every presidential phone transcript. Now, Professor Carlin's integrity of the election. I completely agree with her that presidents cannot try to cheat to win elections. No one should. That is what ended Nixon's presidency. However, this is not the break-in that Nixon had. Professor Gerhardt, her second point was along the same lines. They both referenced Trump inviting foreign governments to dig up dirt on political rivals. Well, yes, except that's not really. One of the examples is during the 2016 election when Trump offhandedly said, hey, Russia, can you find Hillary's emails? There's comedy to that because Hillary couldn't find the emails. Maybe Russia could do it. It's also not a smart thing to say, but in context, he was using hyperbole. It's Donald Trump. Most importantly, he wasn't president at the time. So how could you impeach him for doing something that he did before he was president? Also, the offhanded remark that China should look into the Bidens. Yeah, that was when he was president. Not a smart thing to say. It's his awkward way of deflecting, blah, 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 blah. But is it in our presidential and personal interest as a nation? Yeah. I, again, want to know what the Bidens were doing to make the kind of money that they made and get meetings that even Goldman Sachs and Chase Manhattan cannot get. The president should not be making broad invitations for foreign governments to look into these things, but there is a lot of smoke there, and we should look into it. On to Professor Gerhardt's points. First, Mueller report contained the facts that suggest that the president obstructed justice. Well, I can suggest a lot of things. That's a conspiracy theory. What do the facts say? Now, suggesting something, if that's the new American standard, then you as an American on all sides, you're screwed when it comes to the law. Because if somebody suggests it, well, you're probably guilty. There's also the fact that the Mueller report has been out now for 9 months. If it was so strong, why didn't they pursue it? If the Democratic lawyers didn't find impeachable obstruction grounds in the report 9 months ago, they're not going to find them now. As for Gerhardt's third point, Trump's refusal to comply with congressional subpoenas, this one looks bad. I mean, it's the only argument that has any kind of potential legs with the people, except when you really understand it. The president's defenders have been willing to admit that it does seem like a bad idea for him to keep some of the members of his administration from testifying. Trump has complained that Democrats have only interviewed people without firsthand knowledge of the events in question. Well, Joe Blow at the end of the bar would say, well, then why, if he had nothing to hide, why not let him talk? Well, okay, maybe. But at the same time, let me ask you this. Remember, reasonable doubt. If you were asked to hand over all kinds of stuff that you could explain, but you knew that the police were setting you up for a murder that you didn't commit, and you knew how they were going to make these things look, and they were going to do it in front of the press, and you'll never get a fair trial once it's out, would you just hand over that evidence when the police asked you? Or would you wait for the court, in this case, the Supreme Court, to say, you have to hand that evidence over?